Hi everyone, this is Rick again. I'm going to make the first video for our course for this term, this part of the term, and the first personality disorder is called Dependent Personality Disorder, DPD. We have a handout with my notes that I gave to you during the exam. We also have a short article from a textbook I like called, I have it with me, um, Toxic Coworkers, if you don't have the title with you. And it's about personality disorders in the workplace. It's an interesting writing about personality disorders. And of course, I mentioned in writing last week that I want to talk a little bit about what personality disorders are. And then I want to talk about the first one on my list. For our curriculum, I decided to divide personality disorders from the most, not mild, but the most essential personality disorder that doesn't cause a lot of disruption to the person who has it and to other people around them. And then moving into personality disorders that are more moderate, and then personality disorders that are very, very severe. The severe ones come at the end of the course. Paranoid personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, which we might call sociopathy or psychopathy, psychopaths, the rapists, murderers, many people in prison who have very little or no conscience. Narcissistic personality disorder, we can turn on our television, watching the news, we can see that taking place frequently throughout this very trying time. And borderline personality disorder, which is usually considered a bit of a complicated relationship disorder. Those are the very severe ones that come at the end of the course. Some of the more moderate personality disorders would be, histrionic personality disorder, which is hard to capture and see, schizoid personality disorder, and the obsessive compulsive, which we talked about some when we were talking about the obsessive compulsive disorder, but this is the obsessive compulsive personality disorder with a P, which is a little different. And of course, the dependent personality disorder and avoidant. Those are more mild or moderate. Now, with all personality disorders, they range in scope in terms of they can be very mild, moderate, or severe. Each disorder has its own very special component. And that can be looked at in terms of the world of socialization. If you have a child who's neglected, abused, continues to get bullied, abused, neglected, knocked around throughout school, their environment was high pressure and very, very difficult, and they develop a personality disorder. That disorder may be very, very severe, juxtaposed to a child who grows up in a reasonably comfortable family with parents who might dysregulate from time to time. The child gets dysregulated. They may develop a personality disorder, but that personality disorder may not be quite as severe. Same diagnosis, different level of severity. Just like our pandemic, some people get the flu. It feels like a cold. It's gone in a few days. Other people succumb to it. Same virus, same etiology, but a very different response to different people. So some of us have personalities that can withstand some difficult and complicated environmental concerns, and some of us may, because of our own internal sensitivity, may not respond as well. So the first disorder I wanted to talk about for our class is dependent personality disorder. It's a complicated one because I've made it more complicated. I divided it up into three different distinct disorders. Dependent personality disorder as one, which is in the textbooks. It's in the DSM system. Codependent disorder, codependency, codependent personality. That's sort of constructed probably in the 1980s. It came out of, I think, probably the addiction community, talking about a person who's involved with a chemically dependent person becomes codependent, involved with that person, their involvement, especially if it's an involvement that's beyond constructing good boundaries, they may be considered codependent. I might say in my Rickism that codependents are highly empathic people where empathy has gone on overdrive. Empathy, in my words, is that the capacity to sort of step into somebody's shoes, so to speak, feel what they feel, and the empathic person can step out and get to really enjoy the person and understand their suffering, whatever that suffering might be, and doesn't wear their shoes outside of a few moments, a few hours through a clinical day. We feel what our patients feel when they're suffering, but we go home and we don't carry that suffering along with us. That's empathy. If we carry the suffering with us, that might be considered codependency. The last piece of the personality disorder feature in this area would be considered counterdependency. Counterdependency means to me a person who depends on your dependency. In other words, someone who's appearing very healthy and concerned and engaged with you and hoping to find within you your discomfort or weakness and capitalize on that. A counter-dependent is someone who says, I don't have any dependency needs. I need you to depend on me. And then they complain that everybody depends on them. So that's a little bit different. It's a little bit of a different feature. So we're dividing up, all three of these very special kinds of dependency-related disorders in such a way that they have three distinct different features, even though some of those features might overlap. What does overlap? And what does overlap is humanness. We all depend on others for our well-being. We're all social creatures. We want to connect, engage, and we want to be dependent on another person for love, connection, companionship, friendship, work relationship. We're dependent on our employees or employers to sort of give us instruction, or we take instruction. We're dependent upon people to communicate effectively. We're dependent on people for a variety of activities. There is that sense of dependency, which I call mutual dependency. Quid pro quo. We've heard that, whatever that whole thing has been with the administration, before the holidays. I do for you and you do for me, which in the healthy way is counterdependency. All relationship, the healthy way that's considered mutual dependency. I go shopping for our family, and my significant other will prepare the meal, and I will wash the dishes. She or he will vacuum the floor, and I will wash the kitchen with a mop. We have a mutual agreement about chores, about arrangements. And one of the things I think that's been very clear is that mutual dependency is essential. It's a way we negotiate, and it's very, very healthy and very normal. So, we can put aside in some ways the normal part of our lives that we're mutually dependent. I like to have students work in study groups. You saw this term that we all got together in study groups and connected or engaged in a mutual dependent way. And I got to watch the study groups working. You said, that question is a hard one Rick is giving. Do you know the answer? And someone will say, oh, yeah, I have the handout on that. Do you have that? No, I missed that day. Can you help me? And I said, yeah. And then that person says, oh, I went that day. Did you? No, I didn't go. Let me give you those notes. And we have this collective of mutually dependent people, which is really healthy. Move that aside, and we have, the issue around dependent personality disorder. We'll talk about that first because it's in the literature, it's in our text and our readings today. A person who has a dependent personality disorder is someone who doesn't have the energy within them, the self-esteem within themselves to make cogent, realistic, adult-like decisions on their own. They depend on others to decide for them. You can go out and knock on doors and ask people to vote. And back many years ago, we would see, my screen is going out. Let's see if we can get me back into the light again. Hold on. There it is. I'm back in the light again. we can see knocking on a door, and someone might come to the door and think about in the 1950s, and the traditional housewife would come to the door and she'd say, "Oh no, I don't vote. My husband votes for us." There may be a lot of reasons for that. But we might say that that system that was at play then, where women got the right to vote, during the suffrage time. But it took a long time, I think, to say, I do have a need, a desire to vote. So she might say, no, I don't do that. He does that. I don't drive. He takes me to the store. There is this whole gender differential at one time. We were trying to sort of tighten those that distance, but we can still see some people with a real gender differential. Guys do this and women do that. So with independency, sometimes, we think about personality disorder, we think that sometimes dependency in the personality range might go to deferring, deferential females. Of course, males get dependency issues as well. But in this sense, in the pathological sense, is a person with a dependent personality disorder is someone who might say, if you're in a group and you're going out to have dinner and the study group is over, and say, let's all go get, pizza. And the person with the dependent personality disorder is allergic to tomato sauce, for example. They might say, sure, I'd be glad to go. They don't make their own decisions, their own choices. They defer to others. And there's a lot of fear that if they didn't defer, if they asserted themselves and said, I don't eat pizza because of the tomato sauce. I'm lactose intolerant, and the cheese is going to give me trouble. They probably wouldn't say that. They would go and they may even eat a slice of pizza or a salad, but they wouldn't tell anybody because they really want to make certain that other people come first out of a fear that they might be abandoned or rejected. So people with dependent personality disorder are folks who are usually kind, gentle, easygoing, deferential, which means they defer to other people. These are individuals who frequently would say, I don't need to make a decision that's been made for me, and kind of live with that. I've known a woman many years ago who would go shopping with her spouse so he could pick out the kind of clothes that he wanted her to wear. And he would find her dresses and skirts and pants and garments of all kinds, outside garments that he wanted her to wear. And I asked her, I said, are these clothes that you enjoy wearing? Is this something that you would ordinarily pick for yourself? And she said, oh no, but he decides for me, and it makes him happy. So I'm very willing to acquiesce to his desires because he wears the pants, so to speak, and it becomes complicated for those of us living in the 21st century to kind of see that in the world. But for the person with the dependent personality disorder itself, they don't see any difficulty because, like with all personality disorders, this is something they've always lived with. It's been part of their lives since the very beginning of their experience. They come with parents who are very concerned that their child might maybe be in danger, and saying you must be polite, you must defer to others, you're not capable to make your own decisions. You need to allow other people to make decisions for you. I knew a woman, I'll come up with a man in a case eventually, but one woman who was raised by a divorced mom and who was, very, very wealthy, lived in sort of a large mansion-like house, and moved her two single sisters in. So she had two aunts and a mom who raised this one little girl, and they dressed her up every day in very, very lovely dresses with hose and patent leather shoes, and she was the delicate little Miss Muffet sitting on the tuffet. She was had tea with her aunts and her mom, and tea and biscuits, and she would toddle off to a private school, and her mom would pick her up, or the aunts would pick her up, and she didn't have any playmates, and she was lonely. And one day in the garage, she found a bicycle with training wheels, and she thought, "Oh my goodness, what a find!" And she went out on this bicycle where she could ride it because the training wheels were there, and she could take it down, and she wound up going down the block away from the aunt and mom. They must have been, sort of in the house watching something on TV. And for a while, she would go out and met some kids down the block and became quick friends. And each day, she would sort of sneak off on her bicycle with the training wheels and make new friends. And very exciting. And then her mother and aunts discovered that she was disappearing during the day when she was supposed to be napping or looking in the mirror or playing with her dolls and making these friends. And it was very dangerous to these older women. And then they took away the bicycle and took the training wheels off. So she could take the bicycle, but she had no training on riding a two-wheeler. So she again was quarantined, or we're using that word now, or sequestered in her home. She married very young. Her mom found her a suitable partner who was older and mature, and ultimately they married when she was 17. Permission, and mother gets her out of the house, and she marries an older person. One of the things about dependent personality disorder is they frequently will marry a caretaker. Quite often someone who's older, more mature, who really wants an acquiescent spouse who stays home, who will manage the things around the house. But, in some ways, the dependent personality disorder person feels relatively incompetent and incapable of making their own decisions and needs their partner to decide for them. So this is a person who will call throughout the day and say, I'm preparing a meal this evening. What is it that you'd like? What would you like with that? I'm thinking of going to the store. I have my list. Would you like anything else? And, always deferring continuously to a partner. And ultimately, when they have children, they will defer to their children. The children outgrow them. And very often will share things with them that they didn't understand, didn't know, because they remain naive about so many things, even about human sexuality. There's a naivete about their own body, their own body experiences, their own body pleasures. That seems to be not as essential to them as the pleasures of others. Again, this gets us later on into codependency, which is a disorder that we're very familiar with in the addiction community. So, this is an interesting disorder. We don't notice them very much. They frequently will come to therapy after their significant other passes away, or there's a divorce where they're alone, and they have to learn things like writing checks, using credit cards. Some things they probably don't know how to do very well. They might for a few items, but paying bills, driving. Where I grew up, none of the women in the neighborhood drove a car. My mother was the first one on the block to get a driver's license, and she was quite a scoundrel, among the others. They would toddle down to the grocery store with bags, with bags, and pick things up and haul them home without a vehicle because they didn't learn to drive. That was what their husbands did. That was masculine. It was feminine, is to be incapable of driving and not learning. And my mom had to learn, and so she did, and that was an interesting example. She was seen, I think, in some way as a woman who was liberated because she had a driver's license and she could get around and took the neighbors on jaunts. When they wanted to go shopping, Mom would take them. But again, dependency is framed in such a way, in a very, very antiquated masculine style. Now we're going to move to another disorder, which I think is equally as interesting, and it's in that sort of range. It's under the kind of Rick umbrella. If we put it under a big umbrella, we say, all right, we're going to put the next one in there. It's codependency. I wanted us to really decide, to take this seriously in a way, and this is a Rickism, which means that I'm constructing this and creating this out of terms of what I've observed and what I've seen. Codependency has a mixture in it, which is a mixture of three different interlocking disorders. With dependent personality disorder, there's one big giant disorder there. It's a dependency, some self-esteem difficulties, a real sense of you can do this for me, you can take care of me. Where codependency, there is this strong desire to be loved, to be appreciated, to be desired, but they have a tendency to attach themselves to people who are not capable of doing that very well, and they remain attached to those people. So for codependency, there is that dependency that we learned about, and the belief that they're mutually dependent because their significant others, their children, their spouses, their friends are also giving to them, but they don't get very much, So codependent has a tendency to be dependent on others who are not very dependable, and they remain dependent on the people who are not very dependable in an extremely, what I call a very masochistic way, a tortured way. I'm suffering in the service of the other person. My job is to feel badly because you're mean to me, you're disrespectful to me, you ignore me, you don't pay attention to me. In the addiction community, you go out and go drinking, and I stay home and take care of the children, or I do things in a way to sort of manage the world so that you don't have to, and they remain very dramatically attached. Within that kind of attachment, it feels self-abusive. So the first part of the disorder is dependency. The second part that kind of locks into place is what I call a masochism. Masochism is a term that means I torture myself. I feel that I have to be hurt in order for me to feel alive, feel whole, feel giving. Because giving till it hurts. It does have a spiritual or religious feel to it. You give until it hurts, and they take this into their lives where the codependent is always feeling that they're giving and giving and giving out of this big supply of gifts, and it's never ending. It never completes. It's never over. It's a giving, giving, giving that never comes to an end. And other people don't appreciate it, and they suffer because of it. Now, with that kind of masochism, we would say, get away, don't do this, find somebody who appreciates you. We would do that over and over again, and for some reason, the person with codependency can't really hear that voice outside of themselves that says, get out of there, that person's not going to change, this is the way it is. Even if he or she goes into recovery, they may still be selfish and demanding. And if they're not, you're going to feel unusual because your job is to take care of selfish and demanding and needy people because it makes you feel badly. But that bad feeling is locked into place, so it's supposed to be there. So it's dependency, and dependency with the twist into suffering. And the final part that glues those two pieces together, it's kind of the glue that locks it all in, is depression. We would call it, before we learned about this before, which was great, this stymia, this low-grade, long-term, long-suffering, I call it the great codependent sigh. I'm suffering terribly because of what I have to do to survive in the world and still maintain my relationships with these terribly selfish, demanding people who are always on me. If you're a member of Al-Anon, you see this a lot, and we always ask people to find a way beyond that self-suffering and self-torture. Find the freedom in separating, detaching. Detaching with love is our battle cry, and it's very, very difficult for the codependent to detach with love. And it's one of the most severe disorders I can imagine. It's one that creates tremendous drama for the person who has it. But treating that person is very, very difficult because they feel sort of locked into it in such a way that they don't seem to be able to get out, because in some masochistic way, giving to others, especially those who are difficult to give to, makes them feel alive, feel whole, feel reasonable, feel religious or spiritual or good. Goodness comes in my care for those who are difficult to manage. Codependency is another feature that's kind of interesting in this dynamic of dependency. The third one is counterdependency. And this one is a fascinating one because It's a dependency which means I depend on you to depend on me. If you dare grow up, you dare leave me, you dare take it upon yourself to do anything that I don't agree to, then I'm going to find you disrespectful, that I'm the one who's the leader here. I'm the one in control, and you have to follow my lead. And if you follow my lead, then you and I are going to be compatible. What compatibility is, I'm in charge, you're incompetent, and I'm going to have to make that very clear. I'm always going to be tying your shoes. You don't learn how to do this yourself. I'll be the driver. I'll be the parent sitting down doing the homework for you, not with you, but for you, so you get a good grade. But I get the grade, and I take the accomplishment. You know, if it wasn't for me, then you wouldn't be very successful. And they feel proud of themselves for having this whole busload of very, very, very responsive soldiers who listen to every word I say. I become the controller who takes over the lives of other people. In a 12-step program, for example, you have a sponsor who might take on a new recruit, someone brand new in recovery, and you know, gets them to do everything, saying, you know what, I'm your sponsor and I need to have you rely on me. You need to call me every day and do these things. And in the beginning phases of recovery, boy, having a sponsor who has enough counterdependency to get you to respond is great. What happens with a counterdependent sponsor as opposed to a healthy one is that they're going to require that you continue depending on them, even when you become healthier and you become more independent. Your independence is definitely something that's frowned upon by the counterdependent. I need you to continue depending on me, because if you become more independent, then I'm not going to have a good job. So I'm going to guilt you and do a lot of coercion to get you to continue to depend on my goodness. Counterdependents complain a lot. Codependents complain a lot about how much they're suffering because other people just don't pay attention. Dependent personality types don't complain very much until they're alone and on their own, and then it becomes pathology, it becomes difficult. I'm going to, do this as a 30-minute, presentation. I'll visit it again. I'll overlap it with the next disorder and kind of summarize it. But I didn't want to give people so much in one brief go. What's interesting to me is that I wanted our class for me to be the lecturer and for people to listen and ask questions, and we can't do that in this format. I love talking about these things, especially personality disorders. So I created a video to do this. What's your assignment? Everybody's going to worry about grades and assignments. And I have to say, what I wanted people to do is watch the video. And if you make, some comments, some reasonable comments about it, what you think, what's going on, not a comment about me, oh, it was great, that sort of thing. That's great to hear. But I want you to sort of think about dependency as a personality disorder, codependency, and then counterdependency, and maybe write a paragraph or so, sending it to me via through Blackboard, and I'll give points for it. I've decided for the second part of our course, I'm going to make each disorder, each lecture, worth 5 points, and then if you send me something that I know you listened and watched, you get 5 points. We'll log those in to be able to complete our course with a reasonable grade. Those of you who didn't do well on the first exam may do a little more, so we're able to improve your initial grade. So everybody, all of us, come out of this unscathed by what's going on in the environment. Please let me know through writing back to me that you've listened to me, watched this, and did this, and then we'll go on from there. I really appreciate you and what you're doing. Please stay home for a while, and I will hopefully see you in this genre pretty soon. Thanks.